Hi, my name is Robert Hale, also known as Gericules. And if you can't guess, I'll explain to you later how that word phrase came about that I took on. But anyway, I'm here to talk about the principles of lifting for people over 50. And it's very different than people under 50. And I'll get into why that is in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about me because I like to talk about me. So I have broken a few world records, state records, even the last few years, where was I won for my weight class. I have, if you can see on a video on here on the YouTube channel, I deadlifted nearly 700 pounds, and by the way, that really hurt. But I still like to get it over. I like to get my deadlift over 700. And I also I bench roughly 400 pounds. I'm trying to get it in 425, 440. Those are impressive numbers for anybody. Being 63, I do get admired at the gym a lot because of my and respect because of my age and my I guess my stubbornness to continually lift even when I'm in pain or whatever. But I don't suggest you lift in pain. And in fact, I do want to preface everything I say with a warning, only because I don't want to get sued. Is that everything you hear in this video, you should see a doctor and get their opinion before you start executing. Now, we've gotten rid of the legal language. I do want to go back to me. Again, I have 40 years of experience. I've talked to people. I've read books. I've talked to the experts. I've talked to pros, and I have basically heard a lot of different opinions out there, and some of them are good, some are horrible. So I feel like if you're gonna learn to lift over 50 years old, how to best gain strength and muscle, it's best from someone who has done that before. And who to get trained by someone who's 30, I don't think they really understand some of the issues that the over 50 struggle with, especially. Everyone sort of trains to how the pros train, and that's really ridiculous. I mean, it's like what they're watching kids who just start lifting or looking at videos about how do pros train. Well, you need to know how you train as a beginner before you know how to train advanced. It's like learning how to fly a rocket before you learn how to even make a glider plane out of paper. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense, and so I just see people falling in that constant loop, and a lot of the advice they give is really geared to these professional bodybuilders, and that is not really where a senior should be going. And in part, as you get older, the more weight you put on, the more difficult, even if it's muscle, the more difficulty you'll have in doing certain things, and then at some point it become actually detrimental to your longevity. So you need to be careful about this whole muscle versus strength thing. Now, the reason I bring that up is when you gain strength, it's not necessarily you have to build some muscle, but you also can gain strength in three different ways. You gain strength through muscles, you gain strength through tendon strength, and you gain strength through your nervous system. Because your nervous system is the limiter, and if your nervous system doesn't want to lift heavier, then your muscles and your tendons won't be able to lift heavier. So sometimes you have to sort of slightly nudge or shock your nervous system in order to get those higher and higher weights. Tendons are very important, and in fact, when you look at the Buddhist monks, and some of them that practice kung fu, they're actually very strong. And so Bruce Lee was very strong. And so when you see their exercises, it's a lot of isometric type exercises where it really focuses on a constant, no movement, just constant application of strength, minimal movement. Sort of like this would be like one form of isometrics, and you press real hard. That builds your chest a little bit, as well as your arms. But I don't necessarily recommend isometrics as a way to for seniors over 50, because it really doesn't build a lot of muscle. And the reason you want to build some muscle is you want your body to hold together well along the. It'll help with preventing some bone loss, as well as it'll help with just overall improving the quality of your life, the way you look, the way you feel. You're going to like better the way people look at you. You're going to have more, actually, I hate to say this, but you're going to have more respect for yourself. The bigger, the more muscular you become. It is sort of interesting how people react to strong muscle-based people. So anyway, I want to talk about why improve strength. So again, we talked about some exercises are designed not necessarily around the muscle. So what you need to do, there's isometrics, there's powerlifting, there's Olympic lifting, there's CrossFit training, there's general weight training. There's just a lot of different ways you can increase strength. So the one I recommend out of all those is powerlifting. Why powerlifting? Well, first of all, cross training or CrossFit is not so good for seniors. And the reason is a lot of people, even in their 20s and 30s, get a lot of injuries. I talk to many therapists, and they say they really can't believe the number of CrossFit people that get injured. And think about it. When you're running with a heavy weight, or your quick movements with a heavy weight or a moderate weight, you're subject to risk, and it does happen quite frequently. So what I tell people is, it's better to focus on training, weight training, and then focus on cardio. But don't try to combine them, because you're going to suboptimize them. Unless your goal is to be good at CrossFit, then you got to do CrossFit. But I just don't see that for most seniors. There's a few exceptions, but for most, I would not recommend go that way. Now, I don't recommend go Olympic lifting, because Olympic lifting involves a lot of jerking, and it's a lot of technique. And so it's not as much strength or muscle. It is a lot of technique, and also you can really hurt your back on that. So I wouldn't go with Olympic lifting. Again, Olympic lifting is the catch and jerk, and it's basically those type of exercises. So I don't recommend for people over 50 to do that. I don't recommend CrossFit, and general weight training is fine, but you don't have you don't have a sort of something that ties it all together. So the reason I recommend powerlifting is it is really the most efficient way to gain strength over all those other techniques that I have found. And in fact, there's even what I go even beyond powerlifting is what I call power building, and that's a concept created by Michael Hearn, and you can look him up on YouTube. He does a lot of good YouTube videos, and apparently, I've never met the man, but he seems like a really nice guy. He's 50 years old and he looks phenomenal. He's very strong. Whether he's natural or not is not the issue. We'll talk about in another segment steroids and growth hormone, but not now. I recommend power building. But we're going to talk about the fundamentals of powerlifting first, and then say, well, how is this a little different? Because it's just a little different than powerlifting. Basically, power building sort of builds up your ancillary muscles in addition to major muscle groups. So powerlifting is bench, deadlift, and squat. Those exercises are on YouTube. You can easily look them, or you can look at my Instagram at again Gericules 60 to see how they're executed. But I don't want to go into the detail of how to execute them, because I have found it's everyone has, especially when they start, they have their own way of doing it, and whatever makes you happy, as long as the form is decent, it's not just keep going with it and try to improve. And then as you improve and get better, then you start working more on your form and your technique. But in the beginning, you want to work on your strength a lot, just overall general strength. So with that said, I prefer powerlifting, and again, powerlifting, the bench, the dead, and the squat. So the bench works the chest and all those muscle groups associated with the chest, even your back, because as you pull up the bar, the lats actually engage in the lift. So the bench is really above the waist. It really incorporates many of the muscle groups. The deadlift incorporates a lot of muscle groups from the legs and the back and the arms, but not so much the front torso part or shoulders or any of the deltoids or pecs. It doesn't really engage in those. And then squat, that really is almost it's a lower back and leg lift. Now for squats, I don't recommend seniors doing squats. I think on free weights they should use machines. It's a lot easier. You know, the problem with squats in the power lift, they always want you to go lower and lower, and basically when people say parallel, they don't mean parallel. They mean your butt breaks. The middle of your leg is parallel. Your butt's much lower, so your butt doesn't break parallel. Your butt's way below parallel. And the problem with that is your knees take an incredible beating. And once your knees go, it's really hard to recover. Knees and shoulders, but knees especially. So in order to protect my knees, I don't squat that much. I do maybe squat occasionally, but I'll use machines. And the reason you use machines is it takes the stress off those ancillary muscles and those smaller muscle groups, and it's more of a total strength move. So even though it's not technically as efficient as building muscle using machines and free weights, I still recommend using machines for those over 50, as long as you have adequate machines in your gym. So you'd have the hack squat, you might have the full squat where you put the pin in, and there's some cushions, and you lift it up, but it's held, the machine's held in place. So it doesn't, you're not gonna, if all of a sudden you fatigue, you're not gonna hurt yourself. You just stop doing it. So those are the basic exercises. Now, how is that different than what a senior should do? Well, so those are the basic powerlifting exercises. But seniors, if they just focus on powerlifting, the problem is you're not going to build up your biceps and some other muscles that, they tend to look good. And so the issue is, if you build up the ancillary muscles like the biceps, the triceps, and some of these muscle groups that the dead and the squat and the bench don't get to as much, by building those up, you actually prevent yourself from getting hurt, because those ancillary muscles are affected, and it's those that tend to break when you lift. So when you lift weights, a lot of time you might hurt your delt, your bicep, and so you should be training your delts and your biceps. Now with delts, again, I'd be very careful. I'd use machines, because it's really hard when you're lifting this way to keep it constant without moving a little bit. And unless you're really trained at it, you're probably going to do it wrong and you're going to hurt yourself. So by using a machine, it forces you at least to do the right technique, though it's, again, not as efficient as using a free weight in building muscle mass. And again, the reason why free weights are more efficient basically is it does hit more muscles. It hits all the supporting muscles. So in lifting bench press, you have a lot of muscles, not just the chest. And what the machines do, they tend to isolate only a few of those muscle groups. So you won't be as strong on the bench unless you do the bench. You won't be strong in deadlift unless you do the deadlift. So you need to do the deadlift and the bench and do supporting muscles of those. And later on, I will put a video together on sort of my routine. But for now, just suffice to say, work on bench, work on deadlift, work on strengthening your legs, your quads, your glutes.